Gotta talk about China being super pissed off at Elon Musk allowing talk about the Wuhan lab leak theory to circulate on Twitter. Now he's getting slapped on the wrist by potentially threatening Giga Shanghai. We'll see. But there's a lot to talk about because now it's no longer just the energy department talking about the Wuhan lab leak theory being a potential or even likely explanation, even though with low confidence, that is where COVID came from. But folks, now the FBI is coming out saying the same. Now you might be thinking, like, what does the energy department have to do and the FBI have to do with an infectious disease? Well, surprisingly, they actually have a substantial set of scientists within these departments that are dedicated to the impact of infectious diseases on not only their departments, but the United States as risks to energy infrastructure, energy needs, energy stability, whatever it may be, hospital stability, FBI, whatever. So, however we want to explain it, it's worth noting that now the FBI has come out and said the following, which just hurts potentially Elon Musk. I'll talk more about that in just a moment, what's going on with China and the idea of potentially divesting away from China. But what do we have here? The FBI is now coming out saying the FBI for some time has assessed the origins of the pandemic as, quote, most likely a potential lab leak incident in Wuhan. Holy smokes. This is actually quite interesting. This is despite the fact, and we've known this, okay? The FBI is like 2 years late on this. Maybe it's because the FBI knew they just didn't want to say anything because if they said something, well, A, a certain group of politicians would be really pissed off, and B, what would end up happening? Well, you'd probably get banned from Twitter because you used to get banned from Twitter if you talked about the potential that COVID originated from a lab. Now, you got the Energy Department saying so via the Wall Street Journal expose we just had on Sunday. You've got the FBI now reiterating that, yeah, this was most likely a lab leak. But listen to this. You still have 4 other agencies along with the National Intelligence Panel still judging that the pandemic was likely the result of natural transmission. And the White House National Security spokesman, John Kirby, said on Monday that the U.S. government has not received or reached a definitive conclusion. Now, I write over here Trump. Now, the reason I write over here Trump is not because I'm like, I'm Mr. MAGA over here. Absolutely not. But let's be clear. It would be very unpopular right now for the existing Democratic administration to say, oh yeah, the lab leak is potentially true. Because what did Donald Trump say from day one? The Chinese virus. The Chinese are responsible for this. This came from a lab. Now, at the time, most people thought Trump was just being Trump and that maybe he's right, but he's probably just being Trump. Well, now it's starting to look a little bit more like when Trump was just being Trump, he was actually right. And I know that saying Trump was right pisses off basically anybody who's on the left. That's not the intention of this, okay? This is not to like bow down to Trump. This is just to say, of course, it would be politically unpopular for the White House to admit this. In fact, it could potentially borderline be bad for somebody like Mr. Fauci. We'll talk about that as well in just a moment. We're going to talk about China and Tesla specifically. But anyway, China denounced these comments on Wednesday, saying basically this is a form of political manipulation of the facts. It's worth noting that Tesla's Elon Musk is now getting some backlash because Chinese state media, which a lot of media in China is basically state-run, almost all of it is. Chinese state media calls out Elon Musk over coronavirus tweet. Chinese state media called out Elon Musk this week for responding to a post about the origin of the coronavirus, potentially signaling that the strained relations between Tesla CEO and the country where many of the cars are manufactured could be at risk. That relationship could be at risk. 40% of Teslas are manufactured in China right now. So maybe today in Investor Day, we'll find out a little bit more about how they want to get away from China. But apparently Musk is, quote, advancing the conspiracy theory about the coronavirus. Well, apparently now the Energy Department and the FBI think that conspiracy theory actually holds merit. But anyway, the U.S. right-wing and anti-China media, that China is saying the U.S. right-wing and anti-Chinese media is hostile to China. And basically, China's pissed. And that they think people are trying to frame China. But let's be real, that's potentially likely now, or almost certain what's actually happening. And Elon Musk apparently was responding to a tweet on Twitter about a conspiracy that Anthony Fauci created the coronavirus, and that Fauci should be prosecuted. So I want to talk about that just briefly, and then I want to talk China, because we got to talk China importantly, because there's, China obviously has an impact on a lot of companies that we invest in here. So here's a tweet that says, Dr. Anthony Fauci funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab, lied to Congress about it, and now both the FBI and Department of Energy have concluded that coronavirus originated at that Wuhan lab. It's a level 4 biosafety lab. That level 4 biosafety lab is actually one of the first that China has as a level 4 biosafety lab. And apparently their biosafety protocols just weren't good enough. And COVID got out. But anyway, Elon Musk replied to this and says he did it via a pass-through organization known as EcoHealth. Now, it's worth understanding this a little bit. First of all, technically, okay, let's just consider facts here for a moment. Technically today, gain-of-function research is technically not illegal. Now, it is very unpopular right now to say gain-of-function research, which is basically where you manipulate a virus to do something it couldn't otherwise do. So if that coronavirus originally originated in bats and was able to transmit through bats, if you now screw with it and doink with it or direct its evolution, now it could potentially spread to humans. Well, that is that type of research that is going on, and it's not illegal. Now, technically, people like Anthony Fauci and Pfizer say, no, we don't conduct gain-of-function research. But to me, that's just like saying at Twitter, we don't shadow ban people. Okay, well, what did Twitter do? Twitter actually visibility filters people, okay? It's just a pseudonym phrase. What actually is happening is you're seeing directed evolution happen. Directed evolution is very similar to gain-of-function research. It's probably exactly the same thing. It's just unpopular to use the phrase gain-of-function. And it is a fact that money went from the United States to that Wuhan lab in China. And if directed evolution was being conducted there, then yeah, technically the United States funded directed evolution research, which is basically the same thing of gain-of-function research. Now, you could say publicly, but you're basically just hiding the truth. No, we don't do gain-of-function research. Just like you could say publicly, we don't shadow ban people. We visibility filter people. We do directed evolution. So technically, maybe Fauci could argue, no, he didn't really lie because the definition is different. But it just doesn't look good, right? And so anyway, this is kind of where Elon Musk has come out and sort of bagged on Fauci. Now, a lot of people say, look, hey, Fauci should be in jail. But then you have to ask yourself, if gain-of-function research and directed evolution is not a crime, does he belong in jail? Well, of course, then the counter argument is, but millions of people died from COVID. And if they contributed to the formation of COVID and millions of people died, is that not murder? Well, this is where we have to look and go and say, okay, well, maybe we need laws that actually address if gain-of-function research, aka directed evolution, should be allowed. And then we have to evaluate, does directed evolution ever actually help us in medicine, or does it only hurt us? So, this is all still TBD stuff. It's really easy to just pretend to be on one side and go, Fauci deserves to be in jail. And then on the other side, you got people going, no, he's a hero. Let's look at what's actually happening, okay? What's actually happening is the research that led to COVID is basically happening on a daily basis. On a daily basis, it's happening. And so we have, as a society, have to realize that we're being duped with what it's being called. It is actually happening. And we have to decide, are we okay with that happening? I don't know. We probably don't have all those answers yet. But anyway, this is where we kind of go into China. And potentially, if China is very unhappy with Elon Musk, for example, what could that potentially mean for Giga Shanghai, right? So far already, Shanghai has potentially had its expansion limited. So I'm interested in Investor Day today. What are we going to see in terms of expansion plans for China? So far, the China Gigafactory had massive expansion plans that have been put on hold because of China. And this just adds more tension to what is already a lot of tension in China. It's not good for Tesla. All this drama and this sort of political commentary by Elon Musk and not only that commentary, but obviously now he runs Twitter, is bad for Tesla. But I think it's obvious by now. I mean, you have to be a numbnut to suggest that Elon Musk buying Twitter didn't hurt Tesla. It obviously hurt Tesla. It obviously did. Not only just in the share price declines, because of the amount of liquidation Elon Musk had to perform, but also reputationally, because you pissed off a lot of lefties. And righties have also been pissed off. And I'm not saying I'm one or the other, just saying. China's going to be interesting. Now remember, it's also worth noting that people are trying to dip out of China. Like, people are trying to leave China. Richer people are trying to leave China, and you got manufacturing that's trying to get away from China, because China does this crap. They try to intimidate you to basically manipulate messaging. And to manipulate messaging, they will limit your expansion plans or productive capacity in their country. That's what they do. Apple. Here's which article is this? This is a Bloomberg article. AirPods maker Gore-Tex is one of the many manufacturers exploring locations beyond China. Obviously, as well with Apple, which today cranks out the bulk of the world's gadgets from iPhones to PlayStations, right? Apple is looking to build supply in areas like India and Vietnam. In fact, Apple and companies associated with Apple are investing hundreds of millions of dollars to build new factories in India, Vietnam, and other places. You're seeing a massive divestiture from China because China continues to operate like this. Now, Xi Jinping's speech at the Chinese Communist Party People's Congress was that, we like capitalism. And even though we still like socialism, we really like capitalism. So I really hope that, and I have this hopium, that Tesla can get through this sort of like verbal drama with China, because I think China's realizing, crap, a lot of manufacturers are leaving because we're being too manipulative. So I think China can talk a big talk like North Korea waving the saber, but I think they're realizing manufacturers are leaving. Behind the scenes, 9 out of 10 of Apple's most important suppliers may be preparing large-scale moves to countries like India. That means out of China. Bloomberg estimates it could take 8 years to move just 10% of Apple's capacity outside of China. So China still has time. China's got time. But, you're seeing this transition away from China. It's not just manufacturers, though, that are trying to transition away from China. You have to consider the rich people that are leaving China as well. And this is also quite interesting. I mean, look at this particular article here. The Chinese ultra-rich feel like they are being penalized by government policies. Remember what happened with Jack Ma? Jack Ma disappeared for 3 months. Some people think he got sent to a Chinese re-education camp because he was shitting on China, basically. Sorry, I shouldn't say that bad word. But anyway, relocation experts say crazy spending habits of Chinese wealthiest citizens are sending Asian city-state real estate markets berserk. And this is sort of the subline over here, talking about sky-high rents in certain markets and that. But really, what you're finding is a lot of the rich are disappearing to other markets, whether that's Singapore or, a Chinese autonomous district like in Macau. You are seeing, though, these sort of draconian regulations on the Chinese rich and companies in China driving people out of China. Here's another piece. Take a look at this. Here's a Wall Street Journal piece. As China reopens, flight of wealthy Chinese to Singapore set to accelerate. And so when we go through the piece, what do we see here? Andrew Amoyles, head of research at New World Wealth, says he expects departures from China in 2023 to pick up alongside a broader revival in rich individuals moving around the world. The company expects 125K people with net worths of more than $1 million to move this year, exceeding the record in 2019 of 110K. Chinese nationals usually account for 8 to 10% of that total. New Wealth tracks the behavior of 150K individuals in a database to derive its estimates of migration. Basically, people moving out of China because of the restrictive policies that you have in China. But at the same time, it's also worth noting the United States is trying to slap China over the head as well. U.S.-China tensions over Taiwan are expanding. The United States recognizes that China is seen as a competitor, not an ally. You've got potentially multiple bills in Congress being potentially passed to limit China and China's expansion here. Look at this. House Bill H.R. 554 would allow the Treasury Secretary to bar Chinese individuals and their families from receiving financial services from U.S. institutions. H.R. 510, pressure from the International Monetary Fund regarding manipulation of Chinese currency. H.R. 803, excluding Chinese officials from meetings of the G20, H.R. 540, supporting membership of Taiwan in the International Monetary Fund, H.R. 839, pressuring the IMF to advocate for more currency transparency in China on its exchange rate, holding China accountable, basically the CHIPS Act, limiting China's access to advanced manufacturing chips. You've got a lot of pressure coming on China. So even though we know at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say, can't say with 100% certainty, but I think we could pretty much agree the following. Gain-of-function research happens. Even though when people tell you it's not happening, it's just because they want you to use the word directed evolution. It's nearly the same damn thing. Then, not only that, but we have to realize that China's going to wave its saber because they have egg on their face. They done effed up, okay? They effed up. The primary doctor who first announced in I believe it was November of 2019 that something bad has happened and there's a really bad new infectious disease going around, who ended up dying of COVID, by the way. The guy was in his 40s and people are like, he died of COVID? Mm-hmm. Who pinched the IV? Anyway, so he was announcing that this disaster is coming. China's like, oh yeah, we got a little problem from a flea market or whatever, a wet market. We don't think this is going to expand. Anyway, China's got egg on their face for this, and they're getting a lot of backlash from the international community, especially the capitalist community. And China doesn't want to see their manufacturing flee or their rich people flee, but that's exactly what's happening. So on one hand, I think China's probably going to make oppressive comments and kind of lash out at Elon Musk's endeavors. But on the other hand, I think they're really handcuffed in terms of what they can actually do because they don't want things to worsen. They don't want to be in a situation where all of a sudden, oh crap, we are actually losing more people, more manufacturers, and now our economic growth is being more constrained. Remember, they had this whole massive, if we build it, they will come idea of building ghost cities, and that turned into a disaster. Some of these ghost cities were so poorly built that China is now demolishing maybe not a lot, but a chunk of these ghost cities because these buildings were built so poorly, it's cheaper to just demolish them and rebuild them than actually try to retrofit them and fix them. It's crazy. But China's got a lot of work to do, and I think they're really limited in terms of how aggressive they can be because they're not in a position to be aggressive. They're in a position to talk loudly, but then behind the scenes, let Tesla keep expanding. And then in the meantime, we as a society, we need to figure out how do we feel about directed evolution. Anyway, let me know in the comments